It's Colbert, all right.
Skull's caved in.
On your feet, boy.
Why don't you tell me how you killed Mr. Colbert?
I'm a police officer.
You were the #1 homicide expert.
That's right.
Where's my husband? I want to know if my husband is all right.
Your husband is dead, Mrs. Colbert. Somebody killed him. We don't know who yet.
He go get himself killed.
I do not want that Negro officer taken off this case, sir.
This Colbert's only the start. I say this nigga won't live past Saturday.
Look, I've had your town up to here.
You know what I'm gonna do, Virgil? I'm gonna take you over to Brownsville and put you on the bus myself.
You aren't taking me anywhere, you dig? You're holding the wrong man.
What do you mean I'm holding the wrong man? I got the motive, which is money, and the body, which is dead.
What makes you so sure?
Right, give me another day. Not close. I can pull that fat cat down. I can bring him right off this hill.
There's an attitude that you could just smell almost.
On your feet, boy.
Hate stares and everything else. It just had a smell to it.
I mean now.
In the heat of the night.
And I remember in the song, we had the first line said, "In the heat of the night, I feel a cold sweat creeping across my brow." And it, I don't know, it just seemed to set up the feeling of what that anxiety and everything was all about.
As far as racism from the past, I mean, I was not there. All I know is what I saw, you know, on the movies and read in Black history books.
I think we'll start off with him.
It was horrible. You couldn't get nothing to eat. You couldn't go in a restaurant.
We used to play places where we couldn't eat in the places.
Unless you went around to the kitchen. And I had too much pride to go, and I just starved.
We always had a white driver because that's the only way we could eat.
Sometimes it would get on your nerves to the point where there would be violence.
Any little things is liable to take your life. Small thing.
Abafana bangane basesoweto ngeJune 16, 1976 bakhetshisa amapunu silwela inkululeko sakhetshisa amapunu
The white milk truck driver came up behind us and was honking and honking and honking and everything because there's no driver there. He's going to get the food.
This little dude comes up to me and says, "What are you doing out there on this corner, on this midway after the lights is out?" So I says, "I'm waiting for the drummer to pack his drums." He said, "You at the show?" I said, "Yeah."
He runs and jumps on the bus and starts shouting all of this ignorant stuff, you know, about come to Coons, don't do this, move the damn bus and all this stuff.
"What did you say?" I said, "You asked me a question and I answered it, yes." And then he whips the magic word on me. He says, "Nigger, did you realize you said yes to a white man?"
And man, he was looking at about 19 evil brothers, man. He hadn't eaten in about 12 hours, and he was sorry he ever stepped on that bus.
The last thing I remember was seeing a blackjack coming around, and which about this big piece of lead in leather, and hit me right here in the temple.
At the time we got through wasting his butt, he came out, or the bus driver came out and put on the food, and we just dropped him off the side and just kept on going. Because, I mean, it was just too much to take.
Oh, 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 oh. Sobakauna. Oh, 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 oh. Sobakauna. Oh, oh, oh.
What does that mean?
Huh?
What's the name?
Why is that?
You want to use the gun, we'll use the gun. You understand? How would you like to get shot? How would you like to get shot? No better you would.
But when you're dealing with an enemy who doesn't know what nonviolence is, as far as I'm concerned, you're wasting your time.
I'm still convinced that nonviolence is the most potent weapon.
We would like to move away from the situation of conflict.
We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
We got that rhythm pumping up, a beat without a drummer. Tell me ain't it tough? We got a great big bottom, getting down. Got the only low bass, baby, when there ain't no bass around.
Oh, we can jam in the human being and black. Come, let's go, everybody, to the acapella party. That's where we're doing it.
We're free at last with this thing.
So let's not get into violence, you know. It's not about that. It's about recycling energy. Taking that powerful energy that you have inside of you and put it into something real positive or creative or something with love. And it's a bitch to try to convert hate to love. It's a tough trick, but if you do it, it's the only salvation.
My booyah.
My booyah.
My booyah.
Hi, booyah.
The best thing ever happened to me was traveling, to really see it. I first arrived in Paris 37 years ago on a train with Lionel Hampton's band. I was 19 years old, traveling through Europe for the first time. One thing Europe helped me to do was get out of the situation where in America the main conflict is black and white. all of your problems were right on your ass all the time, and so you had to be careful. You had to keep your antenna up to protect yourself.
You don't have to wash your back in France. Even now, when a black person walks in a club, the first thing they do is find out how to get out of it.
I left the other musicians in the band, and I walked through the train to the caboose as we pulled into the station, and I could hardly wait to get my first look at Paris. We're these kids going over there with this big popular band and everything else. It was like a big candy store. Every night we'd go to work.
My name is Michel Legrand, and I'm a composer, and I don't think that the French audience understood jazz better than the American audience, no. But they were maybe more prepared for it, even if they didn't understand what it was exactly.
I think right away the French, the British, and the Scandinavians, most of the Europeans, understood that it was one of the true original art forms ever to come from America. Music is a strange animal because it's something, no matter what the political context is, you can't stop music from coming in.
On behalf of Rome, Georgia, we are the world.
Nosotros somos el mundo.
Siamo il mondo, siamo i bambini.
We are the world, we are the children.
We are the world for the African Famine Relief Fund.
Worldwide, I think that there's one fraternity of music.
We are part of the world.
We are the world, that's right.
And everybody's joined in that family, and I'm glad to be part of that family.
Join us right now with the rest of the world and think about world peace and world unity.
For me, France evokes many of the warmest and most vivid memories in my entire life. I think I was really lucky to get around. That saved me as a young person. I'm lucky to get around to see how other people do it. They've all made me feel as much as home here as I do in my native country. Going from Chicago to Bremerton to Seattle to tour all over the United States and Canada with Lionel Hampton's band and to Europe. I am deeply honored to accept this love letter from France, the insignia of the Order of the Légion d'Honneur, and I thank you and love each and every one of you for joining me for this very, very meaningful occasion. I'm a very happy man today. Yes, in a way, Europe helped me to define myself as a young musician and my place in the world. And somehow, you were able to have a perspective of your past, your present, and your future.
My father had a big band. And he took this big band to Europe.
Just let everybody know that the names down here are for solos.
Who should sing what? That's where I didn't know how that was going to work.
When all the elements come together, you have to make a lot of decisions as a producer.
When the world must come together as one.
You have to get the right tempo, the right key that feels the most comfortable with the singer.
God's great big family.
The right musicians that will add the right feeling to it. And when you get it really right, that's when the goosebumps come.
We are the children. We are the ones to make a brighter day. So let's start giving.
A producer is an organizer, and Quincy is a great organizer.
Quincy Jones had seen me on television here as a local talk show host. I'm Oprah Winfrey.
One of his real strengths is he has a way of just casting people to all come together to do something real good.
We talked about The Color Purple, and we talked about how he had seen me and how he thought that I would make a good Sophia. He just felt that I would. And asked me if I had done any acting or anything. And I had to finally tell him the truth. I don't think I would have gotten through it had he not been there, because it was undoubtedly the most intimidating experience I've ever had.
You told Harpo to beat me.
When I am around him or can talk to him, I feel like I can do or be anything.
I got a call one day from a director named Sidney Lumet.
He had never done a score before. This was his first movie score.
He said, I'd like you to come down and look at a film. Maybe you do the score for it.
Listen to that bass line in there, and it is so threatening.
And the heartbeat goes again. This is a big step.
But not in any cliche sense the way a Hollywood composer would have done it.
I got up in the one that caused the move.
That you figured with that.
And if the thing goes, I say if, I say when and how. If.
Quincy was born in a time where he could not do anything he wanted to. He could not express himself any way he wanted to.
He had been doing some research about music's roots, so to speak, in Africa. He was as happy as I when Roots came and really went through the top.
They were always having to look for a certain vehicle for me. Something that was specialized. What for? Did they have to find something specialized for whoever?
He surprises me in so many ways because when I heard that back in the 60s that he had become the vice president in charge of artists and repertoire of Mercury Records, the first black person to reach that level, I absolutely was so proud. It was just unbelievable. And then the next time I talked to him, he says, oh man, he says, I'm going out to Hollywood. I said, well, what about the Mercury job?
It scared me because it was like not selling my soul, you know. I said, man, that's $50,000 a year. My soul is worth more than that.
I said, you gonna quit? And he says, yeah, I want to go out and write music for motion pictures.
I just dropped everything and just took that chance. I said, I don't know, maybe I won't make it. I think I'm going. Itachino AV. I gave up my marriage and I gave up my job. Left New York and just jumped in, you know. There were times where I said, too, you're out of your mind. After I did the pawnbroker, I thought the offers were going to be rolling in, you know. Nothing for 2 years.
People asked me at the beginning, how's it working with a black man?
I had no idea at that time, as hard as the system was to get into, that there would be a stand-up director like Richard that would say, Quincy's doing this score. This was not a black picture.
You just want to know how you break into this thing so that you can get a good picture to compose for.
I guess part of it is the adventure and the excitement and probably the danger of jumping into areas, you know, where you know that you don't really, it's not really for real, but it is for real, and you can get back out. I'm up working and thinking about music or whatever. My wife tripped off the alarm, the bell rings, and I go to the back door, and I see the guards to my house. There are 10 guys all out in the backyard with shotguns trained right straight on me. Good luck. One standing here, and as I step out, the guy cocks the shotgun, and the shotgun's right in my head like this, and the guy says, don't move.
The last living thing you're ever gonna see.
And I see his hands with more shells in there, trembling. He says, who are you? I said, this is my home. And these are people that I'm paying supposedly for my protection. They didn't know I was the owner of the house. Only because I'm black, that's all.
You hear that sustained note of music? That's all the way through this whole section.
Rather than tell the ear everything the eye's already seeing, I let the ear go its way and let the eye go its own way. We really listened to about 100 tapes of the interrogation between the two killers. And that's what this thing just felt really, real hard.
If Quincy has any anger in him, then he just used the anger just as a challenge, just as a motivating factor.
Please don't.
Quincy overcame all the obstacles, but he had those obstacles.
If it hadn't been possibly for me, then Quincy wouldn't have made it.
He's got the key to them doors.
And if it hasn't been for Quincy, then somebody else won't make it.
Or he got the map to say, well, this is how you can get to the next road.
After In the Heat of the Night, he started talking to me about getting tired of doing movie scores. He's quite right.
It's a predetermined dramatic structure that you're stuck with.
I think that if a composer concentrates completely on movies...
I was doing up to 8 movies a year. I must have done 34, 38 films.
He's going to lose something inside himself and in his work.
The sprockets don't change and the conditions don't change. In 1969, I think I made my first turn of going a different direction with Walking in Space. Whole album in 3 days.
The producer, the composer, the musician, the arranger, the compassionate helper are all true parts of him. All of them, in my view, are genuine.
Quincy Jones, on a bad day, does more than most people do in a lifetime. On a bad day.
He's been a discoverer of black talent, enormously important black talent, and they became big crossover stars.
Quincy has a sharp learning curve. As we can see, everything he gets into zooms. He's at the top of it, and he becomes, in a lot of ways, the model.
have a feeling that Quincy Jones is one of the most courageous persons, not musicians or men or black or American, but he is a courageous person.
One.
Anybody who's ever been Quincy Jones' friend knows it's kind of like having an anchor there, you know.
Whether jamming with Dizzy, arranging for Basie, or producing for the president, Quincy Jones has done it. He loves a challenge, handles success with grace, and breaks down barriers as if they never existed.
I kicked it off much too fast.
This is the tempo of your original record.
Here we go. All right. This is it.
was 10 years old, my father took me out of Chicago. We took the Trailways bus out to Seattle during the war in 1943. We tried to emulate all of the gangs and the gangsters out there. One night, after stealing cartons of honey and robbing grocery stores and burning down dance halls and all kind of crazy stuff, we broke in the armory and we ate lemon meringue pie and ice cream. When we had too much of that, we started throwing it at each other and started to prowl around the building more to see what else was there. And I broke in this one room. I saw just a dim shadow in the corner of this box, and it was an upright piano. And that changed my life. My whole life was different after that. And I just let my hands hit a few keys on the piano. All of a sudden, I didn't want to be involved in sports anymore. I didn't want to do any more thugging, no more slingshots and BB guns, and I didn't want to know about that anymore. It was just that was stuck, just hooked, totally hooked on the piano. To see what one note would make, what would happen to do 2 notes or 3 or 4, and just from there on in until now, I'm still trying to figure it out.
At school, Quincy fooled around with every instrument he could lay his hands on. But it was in the jazz clubs and dance halls where he would get a real education.
There were certain places like the Palomar Theater where everybody came through, you know, Dizzy or Basie with Clark Terry and these people, and I was just like glued. I'd sit downstairs backstage and look through the orchestra pits to just see the fingers of the piano players and the conductor in action. I'd just eat it all up.
These musicians were heroes who had achieved success prevailing against certain kinds of odds in the culture, racism in the culture at the time, which limit their options a great deal. They were dressed very well. They had a certain kind of demeanor. They were cool. They had a certain kind of masculine bravado about themselves.
And they were so together and fun and dignified and proud and talented and confident. I said, that's the family I want to be in. The first time I heard Clark Terry, I almost had a heart attack. I didn't think anybody could play like him.
So are you. Okay, man. I'll get this shit together.
One, two, two, two. Okay. I'll give you a 4-beat kickoff.
He was always showing up. You know, finally, this little kid comes to me. He said, Mr. Terry, I'd like to take some trumpet lessons with you. I'm beginning to. I want to learn how to play the trumpet.
He said, let me see you play. And I used to play high notes. I'd put my mouthpiece down here.
He would play like not with the proper embouchure.
And if I played too high, my lip would bleed.
Finally got him to put the mouth in the proper position to form the embouchure that's necessary to make the buzz. After one of his lessons one day, Quincy said to me, Mr. Terry, I'm learning how to write music too and arrange and compose. Do you think that your band would try one of my charts? So I said, well, yeah, Q, we can give that a whirl. So you happen to have one? He said, yes, I got one right here. I said, we'll give it a whirl and see how it sounds. So he said, oh, that's great, he said. So we took it down. I passed it out. To make a long story short, we played it. It wasn't very good, but I wouldn't dare discourage him by telling him it was horrible.
Being an interracial couple was really difficult in those times. His plan was that I'd get a job and we'd get married, and that was our plan. And he was at this funky little hotel, and he didn't feel comfortable with my going out at all or anyway. So we spent a week in this funky little hotel, and I got pregnant. We hadn't planned it, but he was great about it, you know. He was great about anything adverse happening or anything unexpected happening, or he always felt like we'll find a way. But the life of a jazz musician is not at all conducive to being a father.
When you're an arranger, what you do is to take a standard piece of music, if it's not your composition, and you try to say something to an audience about that music that they would not perceive otherwise.
Come on, y'all, right here. On a clear day, rise and look around you. You will see who you are, yeah. And on a clear day.
Quincy is not a person who writes in a style, but I hear a Quincy arrangement, within 8 measures, I can tell you that's Quincy Jones. All of the signature things there, the gestures, like what he does with coloration and orchestration, it is his sound.
Can see forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
The gift that Quincy has is an oral sense of what works, combinations that people wouldn't think of. You say, now wait a minute, what about muted trumpet and flute, which is a color he likes very much? When people say a really good ear and they're talking about an arranger or a composer, they're talking about orchestration, the ability to hear colors. One of the reasons why we went to study with Madame Boulanger was to shore up that part of what he wanted to do.
While on tour with Lionel Hampton in the early 50s, Quincy was handed a message from home.
Quincy was in Europe, and he'd been there for about 2 months. And the strangest thing, I gave birth to Jolie, and I was mad at him. I guess I'd had such a painful labor, and I just all of a sudden got really mad at him because he wasn't there. I knew it wasn't logical because he couldn't help it. Mother said, "Oh, you've got to wire Quincy right away, and I said, but he's not here, and I don't think he deserves to know, but, oh. I got over it, and I told him. When he got home from the band, Jolie was about 6 weeks old, I think, and we had this little attic apartment, and I dressed her up in this little yellow Carter's outfit, and got her all ready, and when Quincy came up the stairs after climbing 5 flights of stairs, and he was on the last flight to come up, and I was standing holding her there, and I saw him, and he pointed to her, and he says, "Is that me? Is that me?" And he was just that was a very wonderful moment when he came home, and we had our own apartment, and we had our baby, and he'd left the band, and we were going to start a wonderful new life together, and that was just magic.
I remember going to Basin Street East with my parents when I was really young, and on the way home sleeping in the cab and being asleep on my father's lap, and I used to love the smell of his hands. He had was a little bit of cigarettes, and something about it, I just loved that smell. They were very young when they had me, 20. It's young to have a kid. And he was just beginning his career, and he was working a lot. So, there's certain areas that didn't get attended to. But there was always a lot of love.
Quincy had an attitude about money that he didn't want to worry about it, that he believed it would come. I worried about money all the time. I'd try to talk to him, and he'd say, "Oh, honey, not before breakfast. Oh, not before lunch. Oh, not before dinner. Oh, not before we go to bed. Well, not today." He'd say, "Well, all I can do is my very best, and I'm doing my very best. So I just can't worry about it,
go down to Monday nights to Birdland, see if we could get an arrangement played by Basie. I always was curious how Basie's band got this sound. When you think of all the bands out there, Artie Shaw, Les Brown, and Duke, and Basie, and Lunsford, and all this, they all had a different sound. And that comes from the arranger.
Quincy learned from Basie the utilization of space and time.
One day, Neil Hefti came in. Neil had just recorded Little Darling, and he had the tempo up a little faster like that.
Bing, 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 ding, 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 ding. So he looked at it. It was a good chart. So he looked at Basie and said, "What do you think, Holy?"
Basie said, "Let's try it like this." And he tried the slowest tempo I've ever heard in my life. Bap, 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 bop, boo doo doo dee.
Beep, beep, boop, beep, boop, dee doo dee. Little Darling. Now, Neil brought it in and passed out. Bing, dee dee doo dee doo 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 dee, chicka boom, chicka boom, chicka boom. Dee doo doo. Basie shook his head and said, "Now, had it not been changed to that tempo, it would have been an also ran forgotten tune, you know."
It was like another song. It was like another world. And big, beautiful, fat, rich harmonies that Neil wrote. You could hear everything. When it was fast, it just rushed by. And Basie just milked every part of it. And from that moment on, I was a very, very tempo-conscious person about everything. And finding the right tempo is always, I think, the real key. Just beautiful, and the tempo just as slow as that one that Basie took it down to that day at Birdland. And it's like it makes you triply celebrate just being alive. When it's in the pocket, there's nothing to discuss. Nobody's saying it's a little too fast or it's a little too slow, it's dragging. There's nothing to say. It's right in the pocket.
Today's question is, what's the difference between a composition and an arrangement? Well, you've heard these terms, and there's actually quite a bit of difference, and there's differences within each of these. Compositions simply are musical pieces that are conceived from the beginning to the end with all the markings, expressiveness, the instrumentation, and generally, if it's a great composition, you want to learn it exactly as it's written so you can impart your nuance of expression from the framework of the piece. So the notes, rhythm, expression, and phrasing are just as the composer intended, and then of course you bring your unique voice to it, just as an actor does to lines of a play. Now, an arrangement is where a piece is written for one group of instruments, or it maybe is simplified or embellished for the same instrument, and it can be written for whole different groups of instruments or one instrument. So you could have a piece, for example, that's written for the piano that's arranged for an orchestra, or the other way around. Now, there are different types of arrangements. Some are just for convenience. You might want to have arrangements of Christmas songs to play at parties, and they could be at different levels. And in these cases, sure, you have creative license to embellish or simplify at your whim. But there are other arrangements that are great compositions into themselves, sometimes referred to as transcriptions. Some notable transcriptions are Pictures at an Exhibition by Mussorgsky, originally written by Mussorgsky for the solo piano, arranged, transcribed for symphony orchestra by Maurice Ravel. And the orchestral version is much more widely played and heard, and it is a phenomenal piece as an orchestral work. So there are examples of, for example, violin partitas of Bach arranged by Liszt, by Busoni, and others. And these transcriptions also hold their own as compositions on their own right. So, be able to identify the difference between arrangements and transcriptions so that you're sure that you are being faithful to the score in the case of something that is carefully crafted, as compared to more of a convenience for people to play and share music in a more casual setting in the case of many arrangements that are simplifications or embellishments of popular music.
When Quincy's in front of the band, he's in his orbit. He is so passionate that he communicates that passion immediately. Plus, he brings a sense of confidence.
But it was his childhood dream to write music for another kind of popular entertainment: the movies.
I wanted to do movies since I was 15 years old. Absolutely obsessed with doing film scores. I don't know why. We used to play hooky from school every day of the week sometimes, to go down to pay 11 cents to go see these movies.
Quincy hadn't done a score until then. And I'd heard some of those recordings. I don't know where I'd heard them even, but I was very impressed. The quality that came through, even on those early recordings, was absolute freshness. There was a drive in it, and I thought that was very promising for the movie. The picture is about a redemption. Harlem was the vehicle of salvation. That extraordinary sequence when the kid is running all over town trying to find some way of not having to go through what he knows he's going to have to go through. The tension in that and the cumulative painfulness of it was extraordinary. That kind of thinking is just irreplaceable, you know?
No, Julie!
Violence is something that Quincy understands very well, as you know from his background.
Gangs were coming by, and some dudes from another block came by, and they cornered me and they grabbed me. He took my hands up against the fence and just did like that. Switchblade in my hand. Daddy freaked. I did too, because it hurt, you know. He grabbed the hammer, and I think he got him one time, and they were gone.
Terrifyingly true film of our generation, a generation which is itself both repelled and attracted by violence.
Quincy Jones is doing it. He's been doing it since The Pawnbroker. He's doing it now for the feature film In Cold Blood.
Every time it's sweat, you know, it's painful. I think the composers that really care about what they're doing, they really dig in deep. You make a desperate escape to get down into the subconscious, which I really think all the goodies come from. You really dig in and become a genuine, demented mind when you're writing music for that. If you become the person, the music will come out to fit your emotional needs at that moment. And it gets very strange sometimes.
As Quincy devoted himself to a career in film scoring, his marriage to Jerry failed. He moved to Hollywood, where his reputation as a jazz musician meant nothing, and started working his way up.
A friend of mine was doing a movie, and he came to me and he said, thinking about Quincy Jones for a movie, you know. I said, yes, great. He says, so you think he's black, yeah? Yeah. He said, can black men write movie music? I said, I couldn't answer him. I said, of course they can, you know. And he got the job. It was amazing how that was the 60s. That was in the 60s. Everything was supposed to be cool then.
The Hollywood of that time was a place not particularly hospitable to minorities. But we met a handful of people here who were ready to say, I want to make this statement about the times in which I live.
In the heat of the night.
On your feet, boy.
Seems like a cold sweat creeping across my brow. Yeah. In the heat of the night. I'm feeling motherless.
Norman Jewison is a great director, an absolutely great director. Rod Steiger, fabulous actor. But it was a film that needed the energy of a score. And Quincy gave it that energy from the first frame.
Quincy wrote every kind of film score imaginable. And then he took on television, writing for Ironside, The Bill Cosby Show, and Sanford and Son.
When I met Quincy, I was an actress working on a show called The Mod Squad. And when I met him, I knew I didn't want to go any further. Kind of looked at him maybe as baby-making material. Because he always used to say to me, all you say to me is, I want a baby, I want a baby. And it was true. I had come from a good family. I wanted that. I wanted very much for him to heal whatever wasn't right in his family that he came from. That was very, very important to me. He moved in within 2 weeks into my little house. It was a little tiny matchbox 2-bedroom house, and we took the one other bedroom, which wasn't ours, and we put the moviola in it. And he was scoring a film called The Getaway.
Quincy spent the better part of 8 years writing film scores, where his music always served the story, and his style was dictated by the director's vision.
I had been doing 8 movies a year for the last 3 years, man. I was like, I was click-tracked and streamed and punched out, I just want to get in the studio and hear some favorite musicians just blow me.
I really met him at the time when he made that transition. And he was determined to make that happen for himself, to take himself out of only a jazz musician, to take himself out of only a movie composer, and to go the next step with that, which he did.
Walking in Space was a breakthrough for Quincy. Inspired by a song from the rock musical Hair, the album was part of a new movement in music called jazz rock, or fusion.
This album and Hot Buttered Soul started Black FM, and then Miles of Bitches Brewers the next year. But I didn't care, man. It was just like wrong, and get free to because the movies are really restricted.
He had been pushing himself a lot. He had discovered this whole new group of musicians, and they were forming this pop sort of core to work on these ideas that he had, because he knew he would be doing this on his own. He wasn't working for someone, and I think that's part of that desire to stop scoring was at the beginning, was because he always had to work for someone else. He wanted to have that shining thing that was his own, that record that it was his own, to produce it, to write it, to conduct it. And he was working himself very hard, and then one day he just collapsed.
I went into a coma. I didn't know what it was. And I woke up, it's like somebody blew my whole head off. The pain was so excruciating.
And it was like, well, baby, what happened? What happened? He was a little incoherent. I kept talking into his ear like, do you know who I am?
I heard that Quincy had an aneurysm, and it just took me out because I know what an aneurysm is, and it's an explosion in the brain. And I'm thinking, this great musician, it's gone. He won't be able to do this.
It was frightening. He was out of it before they could even operate for a while. I don't remember how long it was because it's kind of a blur. A day or two, or maybe more.
I saw that gold and white light and tunnel, that old proverbial thing that everybody talks about. And I said, holy boy, this is it. I'm on the way out here.
Everything was a miracle. He was in a 9-hour surgery, and everything was a miracle. There wasn't one thing wrong except he had another one, and they couldn't do two at one time. So he had to come out and live that month or two knowing he had to go back in. When he was in the hospital and I couldn't sign any of the papers to say what would happen to his remains if he would die, I said, that's it. We're getting married. And so we got married in between the two operations.
I told a lot of people how I really felt about them. I had a daughter that was 6 months old that never even called me daddy. There's a lot of realities just come slamming down.
You can't go through anything like that, no matter who you are, and not be changed. He realized, I don't have time to waste.
After being in the business 25 years, I said, I want to really find out what all this means, the African connection. How much of it is African that's left in it, A lot.
Alex Haley was a friend of Quincy's and said he was tracing his roots in Africa. Quincy was very much involved in Alex's process with roots, and every new discovery he made was, like we were part of it.
I started to see what had happened, How he took two words, ko, or kora, which is an instrument from West Africa, and gambi, which is a river, and took those words to trace his roots all the way back to his family in West Africa. And it was awesome. And a lot of my research, felt like it was parallel to that situation.
When the book became a phenomenal bestseller, Quincy signed on to write the score for the television miniseries.
He sent over a packet one night, which were the blueprints of the slave ship, the specific ones I think Alex had ancestors on. And Quincy opened it up, and we were all there, and we spread it out on the table. I sort of knew that this was going to be something heavy. I knew it wasn't going to be just an easy thing. And it did turn out to be that, because he had to go so deep into his own unfulfilled wishes, into his own pain, and he wrote, to me, the most beautiful score. And he took a long time to write it, and the impatience of the producer and the network started to really cause him grief.
Couldn't handle it. I really fell in. I could not discipline myself enough to just focus on just getting the job done. I really couldn't, because it was very, very personal.
He wrote the score, it was beautiful, and then they didn't want him, or I don't know if he decided or they didn't want him to write the rest of it, because he just took too long. Too exacting, too perfect.
Quincy's friendship with Alex Haley brought him to Roots, and his close ties to Sidney Lumet brought him back to do another movie, The Wiz.
In a different place, in a different time, different people around me. I'm on my way to find the Wiz. He's gonna get me back home.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you. And good luck.
The genius who created me only took care of my dashing good looks, my razor-sharp wit, and my irresistible attraction to the wrong women. What he forgot was a heart.
A lion without any courage. Oh!
help us, sir?
What's in it for me?
We'd be very grateful.
I was in New York when I got a call from singer Lionel Skeet Ritchie and promoter Ken Cragen, who told me Harry Belafonte felt we should do something about hundreds of thousands of people in Ethiopia who were starving to death as a result of a famine and a civil war there. I agreed to help.
You know where you are, so let's not give in. We said, there's a choice we're making. You know, we're saving our lives. We are the world. We ain't the children. Those two lines.
We Are the World is probably one of the most famous music sessions in the history of music. Whatever one may think of the song, the session has become famous. There were an extraordinary range of people in that studio. Bob Dylan on the one hand, Stevie Wonder on the other. I mean, that's quite a jump.
Of course, I'm thinking, too many people, too many personalities, it's not going to work. But, you know, he was genius with that. Inside, he must have been going crazy to see if this was all going to work.
I wanted them to understand that this project was bigger than all of us. But they already understood this very clearly. I knew that this was going to be a special evening. I had all 46 sing We Are the World choral parts. No problem. When we got to the last part of the song, they were supposed to sing Sha-La, Sha-Linge. Bob Geldorf, the guiding force from Band Aid Live Aid, said, nope, you can't do that. The Africans might feel we're making fun of them, that we're mocking their language. Forget the Sha-La, Sha-Linge. Sure enough, there was a total explosion of opinions. The whole session stopped cold. There has to be one moment where you must make a very important decision as to where you let them vent. The time to let them lose it and get it all out. This was the moment. I told the crew there filming for MTV, turn off the cameras. We're going to throw down here for a minute. By this time, Stevie Wonder was steadily making his way to the phone to call Nigeria to get the correct pronunciation in Swahili. Stevie asked for silence, and after a pause, he told him he'd just talked to the motherland, and that in Swahili the correct lyric should be Willie Moingu. Sure enough, the shit hit the fan. Ray Charles slapped the side of his pants in his usual fed-up fashion. Say what? Willie what? Willie Moingu my ass. It's 3 o'clock in the goddamn morning. Swahili, shit, I can't even sing in English no more. They were not having it. Everybody lost it.
My head hums.
The session mythologized Quincy Jones more than anything else. It's this tremendous pop music maestro who was able to bring these people together. Whatever one thinks of the music, it's quite an extraordinary testament of his will and his ego that that session went off the way it did.
We're saving our lives. It's true, we'll make a better day. Just you and me.
Okay, let's put it on the tape.
We are the world.
I think when your thing is happening is when you should take all the most chances, you know. And so I came straight out of all of that, which just couldn't have been any better, to say I want to really learn how to make movies well under the best people, you know, with the best people out there.
Quincy fell in love with The Color Purple, Alice Walker's unsparing novel about African-American life in the South. And he was determined to work with the world's most famous film director, Steven Spielberg.
Everybody, including a lot of my friends, were saying he is out of his mind. His first picture he's ever been involved in his life, he's talking about Steven Spielberg. It doesn't work like that.
He just wanted to work with him no matter what. Another one of those, no matter what, I'm going to do it.
He was making E.T., and I was doing Thriller, and we got just enamored of each other. He said, let's intern each other. And he gave me a viewfinder. I gave him a synthesizer. He'd come over to the Thriller sessions. I'd go over to Laird. And at that time, they were calling E.T. Slimehead West. Because the first one, they made the first model they made, E.T., they had to go back and do it again because he looked like a little brother, you know. So that's why he gave him blue eyes the second time.
In casting the film, the role of Celie was given to a largely unknown comedienne named Whoopi Goldberg. But the role of Sophia was more difficult to fill.
While we're casting, I have to go to Chicago. I turn on the TV set at 9:15, and I see this face, you know. I mean, it just slapped me. I was just so hard, you know. I said, who is that? Whoever it is, that is Sophia. No, there was no doubt about it.
Quincy Jones discovered me on a national level. In a split second to look up on the screen, and there I am, and say, that is Sophia. That's vision. That's heart. That's a talent and a gift that I think a lot of people just don't have. I mean, how do you know this person is it? This person is going to work versus somebody else. How did he know that Will Smith was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? I don't know. I don't know how he does that.
It was like going to USC for 10 years, being there. I wouldn't trade that. I didn't even listen to the radio for 2 years. And this is the most incredible growth and experience that I've ever felt, outside of music.
He needed to live the dream now. I wanted to be elsewhere. I didn't want to be on the set of The Color Purple. I couldn't wait to get out. He had become a person that people just wanted a part of. And he began to give away. I saw pieces of himself. And by the time The Color Purple was over, there was nothing left. He wasn't even of this world.
And when we finished, I was so busy trying to figure out what happens with the script, the costumes, the process of filmmaking, learning from the best people on the planet. We got home and I said, great. Now we got a score. I said, score? My God, are you kidding? I mean, I've never even thought about it, you know, during that period because we were rushing and working very hard.
He wrote a very, I think, sad theme in that. He wrote some sad music in that because he knew it wasn't staying together. It was a very sad breakup. It was over like that. And it was very hurtful to the family and very hurtful to Quincy. For him, it came out of nowhere. But it had been growing in me forever.
As his marriage dissolved, Quincy struggled to complete the score of The Color Purple. A doctor prescribed Halcyon to help him sleep, but the drug deprived him of his dreams and made things worse.
didn't realize how sick I was, and restless, no food, anhedonia, there's no joy, just everything. It was just shutting down. Couldn't look in the mirror. My eyes just scared me to look at it,
He really kind of broke down then. And I think he had pushed himself so hard, he'd used up all his adrenaline, is what they said. Well, I got this postcard from him, and it was just odd because it said, it's taken me 3 weeks to write this postcard. I could just, in that one line, hear, what a hard time he was having.
I finally called Dr. Norton, and I said, I need to find a sanitarium. It's over. It's go-gown time, right? Something. I couldn't write my name. And he says, what have you been doing? I said, I've been taking calcium. He said, what? Are you crazy? After 2 days of dreaming, you'll be on the way. I was so happy. In 2 days, all the feeling came back into my body and everything. It was just like a rebirth, It was incredible, man. It's about stereotypes and preconceived ideas, and people that don't get around each other never get to know each other. And that's my remedy for trying to cure some of the things is just getting people together so they can know each other. So he's not a bad guy, but and I've heard lines in my life many times. Oh, but you're not really black. I said, yes, I am, really black.
Quincy Jones is a man who has described himself as not being particularly political. But I think he's always been a man who had a certain kind of real commitment to not just be a success, but to try to do some good, to do well and do good.
Hi, I'm Quincy Jones, and this is the first official opening ceremony leading to the presidential inauguration.
I always tell people being in politics is a lot like playing jazz. After a certain point, you got to ad-lib. And that's kind of the way politics is. So I think he identifies with people in public life, and I think he's interested in them. And he understands that it's only through politics that you can address some of the problems that people have that he cares a lot about.
Are you ready for the big one, Mr. About-to-be President Bill Clinton?
I think so. We'd better be. We're looking forward to it.
Well, there's a lot of people out there waiting for all of the Clintons and all of the Gores, so let's hit it.
Great to talk to you.
Haley
Thanks
Mamnoon.
Haley Mamnoon, thanks. You're starting off with Farsi. We're off on a good foot. I have 25 minutes with you here. I don't even know where I start with someone with your career, so I thought I'd pick some moments from throughout your illustrious career and throw them at you and get some stories from you. And I wanted to start right from the beginning. There's this amazing story. You're this kid who doesn't have much growing up in Chicago. You moved to Seattle.
I wanted to be a gangster then.
You wanted to be a gangster. You're around 11 years old.
I saw a dead body every day.
You and your brothers are trespassing, this petty crime. You're in a community center. You see a piano.
And now we break in a room and I see a piano.
You break in a room, you see a piano, and that is the moment where your life changes.
Saved my life, yeah.
Take us to that day.
Well, we had the city covered. We were baby gangsters. We had all the stores, working all the stores, steal boxes of honey, everything else. This is during the war, in the 40s. And we went in this, the Armory was our recreation center, but it was also an armory for the military. And we went in there, we ate up all of the lemon pie, and ate ice cream and then had pie fights and everything else. Then we walked around and broke in the rooms and so forth. And I worked in one room, saw a piano in the dark. I spin it, and I closed the door, and something said, "Go back in that room." And I went back and touched that piano, and I knew that through that the rest of my life. And the next day, I started staying after school. I learned sousaphone, tuba, B-flat baritone, E-flat alto, French horn, trombones, because trombone players get the marching band to be next to the girls, the majorettes, right? Trumpet players way in the back.
But what is it? What is it that you knew when you saw this piano? What was it that you knew?
I didn't know anything.
How?
It just something happened to me. I never conceived, because I heard a lot of music when I was young in Chicago, and St. Louis too, where my grandmother was. And that's where Miles Davis and Clark Terry and all those guys are from, And, but I didn't think that human beings did it, And when I saw that piano, I understood it. I understood it immediately, And if I hadn't done that, I would have been probably dead or in prison right now. No question about it.
Your mother had a psychotic breakdown.
Yes.
Was committed to an institution when you were 7 years old.
Dementia praecox. They took her away when we were 7 years old.
7 years old. Your stepmother was emotionally abusive. You said that as a child.
Precious. Did you see Precious?
Yeah. That's you.
That was her.
That's your life. You said that as a child, you had to make music your mother.
That's right.
How did you do that?
That's right. Because I said if I don't have a mother, I will let music be my mother, and it never let me down. And the harder I worked, it never let me down, And as soon as I started playing instruments, I started to hear other sounds, and that's why I knew I was going to be an orchestrator and a composer and arranger and all that stuff. Because my first thing was arranging for 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, 5 saxes, drums, bass, piano, and guitar. That was God, And then later on, like Nadia Boulanger says, I went to Paris and studied with her, who was Stravinsky's mentor, and Leonard Bernstein and Aaron Copland. And she said, I have to be very careful with jazz musicians because they shack up with music first, then they court it and marry it later. It's very true. And I wanted to learn how to write for brass, strings, woodwinds, and percussion, symphony orchestra.
But music became this kind of caretaker for you, of you.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
Still is.
Still is.
Well, creativity is,
Let me ask you about creativity then, and the diversity that is Quincy Jones, because I'm a kid of the 1980s. So I know Quincy Jones, the famous guy, the hit maker, the pop wizard, the R&B soul guy. You were a serious jazz guy through the 50s.
Yeah,
I mean, you're on tour with Lionel Hampton.
No, understand, man.
Yeah.
From day one, we knew how to play every kind of music. Sousa, Debussy's, Schottisches, bar mitzvahs, rhythm and blues, everything. We played everything, man. I got a lot of this is when I started doing Michael Jackson. I didn't have to learn anything to do Michael. I mean, I've been doing that all my life.
That's my question, though. Does the guy who toured with Count Basie or did arrangements for Count Basie and Gene Krupa, Sarah Vaughan,
everybody.
That's the same guy who can produce hip hop or pop music?
Well, but we were doing it all our life. It's the same. Nadia Boulanger said, Quincy, God gave us 12 notes. The Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, Bo Diddley, Basie, Bird, all use the same 12 notes until he gives us 13. I want you to know what everybody did with 12. And I studied hard for 28 years, man. And there's not, for 7 decades, we never stopped, you know.
Not a lot of people cross over the way you have. Do you lament the fact that there are those silos? Jazz, rock, pop.
The best gift I ever had in my life, one of the first television productions I did was Duke Ellington, We Love You Madly. We had everybody, Basie, Aretha, Sarah Vaughan, Roberta Flack, Peggy Lee, Ray Charles, everybody. And basically, Duke gave me a picture of him, because he was just before he died. And he says, may you be the one to decategorize American music, because I hate categories, man. It's good or it's bad.
And do you think we've gotten better at that? I mean, the internet has facilitated that decategorization, right? You'll see kids walking around with an iPod with rock music, hip hop music, and jazz music on it. Do you think you've made that impact? But not thoroughly, you know. They not getting involved in it all the way, you know. I mean, really giving everything you got to everything, every genre you do, and. Our motto back then was empty the cup, and it comes back full, twice as full every time. Empty it. Give it everything you do, shining shoes or whatever. Just do it the best you can do it, you know. And I remember when I was shining shoes, I had during the war, all the guys would wear Stacey Adams, you know, and they'd have little razor cuts in there for the bunions, you know. And most guys, they'd wear white socks and Stacey Adams, and so I had my little bottle to clean the strings with, you know, which was do first and then put the liquid around the side and exhaust the liquid, so when you put it over that thing, it wouldn't go on their socks, because the other guys would put it on their socks and they never went back to them. They always came back. Where did you learn that motto? The empty the cup.
I don't know.
Motto?
I just my perception was that that's what they want. They didn't want their socks with full.
No. The motto though, empty the cup. Huh? Empty the cup and it comes back twice as full.
Well,
where'd you learn that?
When I was young, I knew why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk with your lung. And I used to. I was fortunate to meet Clark Terry's and Count Basie's and Ray Charles and so forth that told me how the guys think. You know, he said, "Young blood, step into my office." That's the slang. "Young blood, step into my office. Let me pull your coat." That means I have a life lesson for you. And he'd say, in black show business, there's hills and there's valleys. That's the analogy for success and failure. And he says, success in the valleys take care of itself. But when you get, the hills rather, when you get in the valleys, that's when you find out who you are. And whether you can withstand the pressure that goes when you get it wrong, you know.
I'm glad you brought up black show business.
Making mistakes is the best thing you can do. That's what makes you grow.
But it's not easy at the time.
It makes you grow, man. I made all the mistakes in the world, man. Even taking 33 people overseas, man, at 26 years old for 10 months. Oh, my God, man. I paid for that for 7 years. It took me to pay that off, you know.
That's early on. Do you feel like you've made mistakes in recent years, too?
Yeah, I keep making them.
I wanted to ask you about
more chances you take, the more mistake. You say you can't get an A if you're afraid of getting an F.
Right.
You can't worry about it, you know.
You, in the 60s, you become the first high-level African-American executive at a major record label, Mercury Records. In the same decade, you become the first black composer to be recognized by major studios in Hollywood. Quincy, did you feel like a trailblazer at the time?
No. I just did what I did. And I had worked very hard to get it, and so my biggest fear, that's a word I don't use very often, was that I'd get an opportunity that I was not prepared for, such as working with, 1958, I was living in Paris. I'd come in the office one day and they said, Grace Kelly's office just called from the sporting club in Monte Carlo. I just saw Princess Charlene last week. We had lunch, you know. That's Albert's wife, you know. We got the same birthday. But when we played, Frank asked me to bring down 55 musicians, my house band from Paris. The Double Six and Stephen Grappelli, Kenny Clark, and Don Byers, all 55 great musicians, you know. So we played with him that night. 6 words: "Good job, kid. Cuckoo." That's all. Then 4 years later, I get a call from Hawaii, and somebody says, "Hey, Q,
first time I've called that, you know. This is Francis. I'm directing a film in the Kauai called None But the Brave, and I heard the record you did for Basie last year, and you took Bart Howard's In Other Words, which is a waltz, and you know, and we did it with Basie, you know, 4/4.
Sure.
And he said, that's the way I want to do it. And said, would you consider doing a record with me in Basie? Man, I said, is the Pope a Catholic? Absolutely.